Hello everyone, we are Geeks Not Nerds. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
Vince, it is time for the third round of the Multi-Topic Extravaganza!
Huzzah!
Yes, the third one! So we've done two of these before, and what we do, if you don't know about them, is this is kind of a Q&A with topics that people have asked us to do that we can't necessarily get an entire video out of. And sometimes we'll answer a question on this and then we'll go, nah, that'd make a good video. And then we'll actually do a whole video later on. And we also just take basic Q&A questions also. We announced this on a couple different videos, so we've gotten some recent Q&A questions for this. And we also have some questions that have been in the queue for a while, and for a while I mean like months, that we have never done a video on that we might tackle during this also. Now, if your question doesn't get answered, let us apologize in advance, because we always get a lot of questions, and we do as many parts of this as we can to try to get to a lot of the questions, but we don't always get to all of them, and sometimes people will ask multiple ones and we won't answer all of those questions. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get rolling on this. We like to make these about half an hour, although I'm not paying any attention to time. I guess I have a clock here, so yeah, I got it. So now we got that worked out. Vince, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready for the third Multi-Topic Extravaganza? Once again, remember, this will be several videos.
So this is part one.
This is part one
of round three.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we need to look for a warp zone. Okay. There is a list of questions that begins this from Autobot Grimlock, and I'll just pull a couple of these out of here. He says, what is your favorite Autobot, Decepticon, Maximal, or Predacon? And I've never been a big Transformers fan, so I'm not sure that I really have one. Do you? Do you have a favorite?
Growing up, I was always kind of Bumblebee, but really, I was never really into that show. There was a couple of shows that my brother loved that I just didn't care about.
Was that one of them?
It was Transformers and Thundercats. I just never cared.
I never watched Thundercats.
Although the action figures of Thundercats I loved. Oh, they were so cool with their giant weapons and stuff.
I'm going to say Starscream.
Fair enough.
Name all the Pixar movies backward?
All right, hang on.
Can we do that?
I can at least name some of them backwards. Are you ready?
Oh, no.
See here, there's WALL-E, there's Up, there's Monsters, Inc., there's the prequel to Monsters, Inc., and there's Toy Story 1, 2, and 3. Oh, man.
If we made a whole video on that and we took the time, I could probably get really close.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna do that now, but we should consider maybe doing it as an exercise down the road. Are you a big enough Pixar fan to even attempt that?
I like most of the Pixar movies, but I wouldn't call myself a fan.
I used to know them in much more in sequence, but then they kept making them. But anyway,
I feel like they're going downhill a little.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I didn't like Brave. I thought Brave was very early DreamWorks-y.
So.
But
really, I feel like that was my worry about it.
I feel like DreamWorks and Pixar are starting to cross a little bit. Like Pixar's like, let's become a little more fun, and
DreamWorks is like, let's tell stories somebody cares about.
Yeah, so they're making things that I feel like Pixar is still not bad, but becoming less artistically sound, while DreamWorks are becoming more artistically sound, but not as artistically sound as some of the other Pixars. I almost said the wrong one there. Well,
fair enough. Who is your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Oh, Raphael.
Yeah? Mine's always kind of wavered back and forth. When I was a kid, it was Donatello. I think it's more Raphael now, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's just always had more characterization. Yeah. I think in the IDW series currently, it's maybe Leonardo. But anyway.
You know, when I was a kid, it was Michelangelo because he was goofy, and when I was a kid, I loved jokes, even if they were terrible ones. It still hasn't changed, but Raphael appeals to the angry loner in me.
Yeah, so does the Thing and a lot of other monster characters. So we got a lot of questions this time, naturally, about the possibly impending Justice League movie from Warner Brothers, so just brace yourself. There's going to be a lot of those. Fivekeeper7 Full says Marvel Studios is on a roll with their cinematic universe. So, what advice, Cap and Vince, can you give or would want to give to Warner Brothers or DC? And I'm sure somebody from there is watching, right? Building a cinematic universe following Man of Steel and Justice League. They are behind, but honestly don't have a friendship or trust with fans like Marvel does. So what advice would we give them? Go ahead, Vince.
I think I have this covered.
Okay.
Don't screw it up.
The advice I would give is almost that vague, but serious. I would say what Marvel did is not a formula or a recipe for success. Just because it worked there doesn't mean it's going to work with your films. And in fact, if you try to just carbon copy it, it probably won't work. Because what they did was very experimental, and they were and they were to a degree lucky that it worked. Although they were smart enough about it that you can kind of point to why it worked. But it's like Lost, you know what I mean? Like that show was something that people had never seen before, and then for a couple years everybody tried to duplicate it and they couldn't do it. So I think that DC and Warner Brothers need to be as inventive as possible. That's being very vague. I don't know what exactly they need to do, and I don't really want to hypothesize that hard about it. But
this is going to be horribly vague too. But I think what you need to do is create movies about characters that people care about. And I mean that for both statements. You need to create a story that people care about and make them care about the character within the context of the story. You know, you could effectively make whoever you want. Like, first of all, let me say this. We didn't necessarily know that everybody's going to care about Thor. We didn't necessarily know that everybody's going to care about Iron Man or Captain America or blah, 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 because they weren't as radically popular in the general public eye as somebody like, let's say, Spider-Man.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if you create a movie that is worthwhile upon, whatever grading scale you wish to give, I mean, if you create a story that's worthwhile, people will flock to it. I mean, or maybe not flock to it, I'm being hyperbolic, but people will give other ones the time of day.
Well, and that's the reason that Marvel, I think, intelligently has said, okay, well, it worked for these second stringers, and maybe not second stringers, but that's not entirely fair. I think at one time you could have called Iron Man that, but it worked for these guys. Let's now try with some third stringers, and so we're gonna get Ant-Man, we're gonna get Guardians of the Galaxy. These are things that they wouldn't have wanted to attempt until they could make characters like Iron Man likable on screen. But the point is, they made Iron Man likable, and he's popular, in my opinion, because he deserves to be popular. That's why he got so huge. I think that they sold it, and I think they sold it right. DC and Warner's need to be really, really careful that they don't just go, oh, okay, so what we need is just a whole bunch of movies that are all in the same universe, and then they'll sell. No, that's not all it takes. It's fine if you want to put them all together, but we're not all just going to sit there and go, oh, you're so clever because I saw that guy in that movie. I don't think that that's what's made the Marvel films successful either. I think it's that there's a certain level of quality to them.
Yeah, and there is a through line between the movies, things that exist in each movie that ties them all together, which if the eventual plan is to make something that ties all the movies together, I would put little bits between each movie that does. I mean,
kind of like they did with the Marvel films. Although we both said when Iron Man 2 came out that we thought they were already stretching that a little bit too far. But I think ultimately at the end of the day they kind of did okay with it. I think once they got past that, I don't think Captain America and Thor had too much of that. And so I think that by the end of the day, when Avengers came out and that was pretty good, that it worked out okay. By the end of the day, it worked out okay.
I suppose a big piece of advice I would give, not that they're listening, but is don't let the eventual product weigh down and weigh too heavily on the current product.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're going to make a Superman movie that's going to lead to a Justice League movie, don't make it Justice League Part 1. Make it Superman that has something to do with the Justice League.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Let's see here. Okay, another movie question. Robert Emmett asks, Captain Vince, I'd be interested in hearing your 2 cents on the idea of releasing the FF reboot the same year as Avengers 2, Justice League, and Star Wars 7, and if this will affect its performance at the box office, and if it's even worthwhile for Fox to put it in a shared universe with the long-established X-Men films. Let's start there. There's a little bit more to this question. I think that he's right. I think it is risky to try to do Fantastic Four that same summer. That'd be rough.
Now, if it was just Avengers coming out, that'd be like great publicity.
It would be, yeah.
But considering you have those 3 guys coming up next to it, what was it? It was Star Wars 7, Justice League, Avengers.
Avengers 2.
Avengers 2.
Oh my lord, yeah. That's a bad idea.
Somebody's going to go see those movies over the Fantastic Four.
I think so too.
Granted, if somebody said, Vince, you can only go see one of these movies, what you going to go pick?
Well, you'd pick Fantastic Four.
I'd pick Fantastic Four.
But that's because that's the thing that got you in the comic books.
It has a very cemented sentimental place for me.
I think when it comes, with me and you, I think when it comes to superheroes, there's always that thing that got us in the comics, or that we always latch onto, that's going to trump everything else, whether it's rational or not. Because for me that summer, it'd be Avengers 2. Why? Thanos. Like, it doesn't even matter that it's Avengers 2 and that this is going to be a huge movie and it's probably going to break all the records again. No. It's Thanos. You know what I mean? I'll see Guardians of the Galaxy the Thursday night before the Friday opening, not because I care about Guardians of the Galaxy, because I know Thanos is in it.
You know, for me, that thing is the thing. So... I love the thing.
Let me say that I am very, very excited about a possibility of a Fantastic Four reboot, because I know that when that happens, we're going to probably finally get eventually a Galactus that is not a giant cloud, and that's very important to me. I really want to see that. So
I will say that I am in the extreme minority. I didn't hate either of those movies. I understand why people like them.
I hated them. I think it could be done much better.
Yeah, you know, I would agree. I think it could be done better
in such a way that does not insult our intelligence as hard as those movies did. And I've always felt that way, and I especially always felt like they were a little bit sexist with Sue Storm. I think that she is an awful female character, and that it's very least common denominator for female characters, and that I am supposed to buy that she's a scientist, and that irritates me because it doesn't work at all. So anyway,
I would agree. I feel like Incredible Hulk does that even more so to Betty Ross, but
I don't think it does it more so. I
feel like she's infantile in that movie.
Interesting. I didn't really think about that. I think that's just because she's played by Liv Tyler, and Liv Tyler always seems kind of infantile to me. But
that might be the case.
I'm not sure that has anything to do with the writing, man. Part of what he was asking there also was I
forgot what the question was.
That's okay. What we think about them putting that in a shared X-Men universe.
Oh yeah.
Personally, I'm not loving that yet, but I could be sold on it eventually, maybe. I don't really love the idea of two Marvel shared universes where they have to split it up like that.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of becoming necessary, but really we're going to have Spider-Man off over here, we're going to have X-Men off over here. I think you'll kind of leave X-Men alone, because X-Men makes more sense as its own universe outside of Marvel. I sort of like the idea of X-Men outside of Marvel, because a Comics Kid brought this up last night in our live show in the comments, and I didn't mention it, but I read the comments, and he said, you know, it's never made a lot of sense that we've talked about this on the show. I think that it's never made a lot of sense that X-Men and Marvel are in the same universe, because everybody loves the Avengers, and everybody is scared of mutants, and it all pretty much seems to have to do with superpowers. So what's the problem?
Yeah, it's exactly the way I feel about it. I would like to see, like, I'll say this. I prefer X-Men being by themselves. I would like to see sort of an experiment, and I don't necessarily want Fantastic Four to be the ones that it gets experimented with, but I would like to see something where you have a group of powered people that are advertised, or marketed rather, as the non-mutant super team. And then them really having to deal with hate, and like people being afraid of them but still trusting them because they're allied with somebody that they do trust. So I think that would be cool. I don't want it to be the Fantastic Four.
That's a great point. He also goes on to ask, also, do you think, and I'm only bringing this up because it's related.
Ooh, Alpha Flight. I would love to see that with, like, Alpha Flight or Excalibur, or, like, This is X-Force or whatever.
Being outside of, I can see X-Force, but the other two you mentioned, being outside of the Marvel shared continuity, where everything they're doing right now is kind of gold, I don't think those would sell very well. But that'd be the only reason not to do them. But
that's how you do the experiment. Keep Fantastic Four separate from X-Men, and then release something where they're like, this is the super team of the year.
Also, do you think that the reason behind the Days of Future Past movie is just so they can clean up the mistakes in the continuity and help make the arrival of the FF seem less contrived? Possibly. That doesn't mean that I'm any less excited for it, given what we've been hearing about it, and the fact that Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen are coming back, and Hugh Jackman's coming back, and I mean, like look, I hope it tells a story first and fixes some problems second. If it doesn't fix all the problems or it creates some new ones and there's some great story there, look, First Class had all kinds of continuity mistakes, and I think it was a solid flick. So, whatever. I honestly don't really care that much if it's a good movie.
Again, make a movie that's a good movie regardless of the continuity.
Yep.
Oh my god.
And I'm not sure how much that movie is going to have to do with the idea of bringing in FF. I guess we'll see.
I don't necessarily... I've not read Days of Future Past. I think Claremont has kind of an annoying knack for dialogue. Or a knack for annoying dialogue, we'll say that. And, but I feel like if you would just stick to the source material, if, like, Wolverine Origins is such a big issue, such a big problem, like...
And they're largely ignoring it at this point, but the thing with Days of Future Past is they can't straight up stick to the source material because they've already used some of the characters in that in different places and they can't use them. You see what I'm saying? Kitty Pryde is a huge thing in that book and they've already used her and she isn't where she'd be. So, you know, there's some stuff like that that you kind of have to deal with. The nice thing, and I've said this before about Days of Future Past, though, is that if they do want to take a lot of that story from the comics and not just make something new up, the nice thing is, because they're from the future, because they've used so many mutants already, they haven't used Forge yet, and they haven't used Cable yet, and they haven't used, you know, those guys. So,
I guess what I'm saying is I'm just glad that they're showing some kind of respect to the source material. And Claremont is respected so highly that I'm glad that they're looking at, like, key issues in books.
Yeah, although, you know, First Class was a comic book thing, too, and that movie has very little to do with that comic book.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, so I'm just saying, we'll see how much respect they really have. Just because they used the title, I don't think means necessarily anything to do with that. But
that's a good point.
Golden Gun User says, what is your opinion on manga versus comic books? I think we've talked about this a little bit before. We're not manga readers. We just...
Well, I've read some manga in my time, and really, the manga I've read I've enjoyed. I'll admit it. A lot of the anime I've watched, I feel kind of like childhood versions of the manga that I've read.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But a lot of the manga I've read is really pretty solid.
Fair enough. I've not read much, so when I say I'm not a manga guy, I'm saying I don't have an opinion because I've not read very much.
I mean, it's cool that not all manga has to be superheroes. I mean, it seems to be in order to be a popular comic, you either have to be The Walking Dead or a superhero. But I enjoy American comics more than I do Japanese manga.
P.S. James Mysterio, should stories be told through different mediums that are set in the same universe, i.e. Star Wars? We talked about this a little bit before. I have largely not been a giant fan of this idea.
Yeah. But you've recently added an amendment to that because of this particular book.
Yeah, I have...
With Star Trek, anyway.
I have more and more been discovering things, especially with Star Trek, where I've gone, well, now I wish this was canon, because this clears up some issues here, and it all works pretty well, and it's pretty great. The reason that largely I don't love the idea of that sort of thing is because I feel like it's alienating to newcomers. Mm-hmm. The difficulty is, if you have, and frankly with something like Star Trek, with what is generally considered canon on screen, there's already too much of it. It's already alienating to a lot of people. There's a lot of people that they don't mind the idea of Star Trek, they just don't want to get into it because they feel like it's going to take up their entire life to watch all of it. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. Star Wars is largely the same way, except that if all that was canon were 6 movies, it wouldn't be a problem. It's 6 movies. It doesn't take that long to watch. But then you go, oh, well, all this other stuff is canon too. And then what ends up happening is you try to be a fan of it, and you always feel like you're trying to play catch-up. You know, you're constantly trying to catch up to everybody else that are big fans of it, and if you ever get in a conversation with somebody else, you'll end up, inevitably, with irritating fanboys that'll be like, oh, you haven't read that. You should, you don't know anything about Star Wars. And that's irritating and kind of ridiculous. So, especially because I feel like with a lot of franchises, and it's not just Star Wars, and Star Trek has this too with book continuity and stuff like that. I mean, trust me, it's not like Star Trek is immune just because it has more stuff on film, more stuff filmed. What you end up with are people that are in denial about how much stuff contradicts other stuff. You know what I mean? So that's the reason that I'm not a big fan of different things being continuities. Having said that,
if this were not the true Star Trek, would in it you not find many contradictions?
Having said that, what you do end up with sometimes are, the creator of things that will say, these things are canon even though they weren't part of the original medium of it. For instance, all of Joss Whedon's comics are canonical with everything else. So, like Buffy season 8 and 9, that's just canon. Considered canon by the creator of it. What do I think of that? I don't know. They feel like sometimes kind of different things to me, and then sometimes it's awesome, and I want it to be canon. So I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of mixed on it.
I'd feel that way about quite a lot of the stuff that's actually filmed about Buffy. So I'm like, man, this is really bad. I can't believe this is taken seriously.
Well, I don't even mean like quality. Is it good? Is it bad? The comic book medium is very different from the television medium, and so they'll do things in it where I'm just like, well, that just doesn't seem like something the TV show would have ever attempted. You know, that sort of thing. So I'm like, if this had been on TV, whether it's good or bad, they never would have done it this way. You know what I mean? So that kind of thing.
Fair enough.
So I guess my opinion is, I don't know.
I just think they should be highly selective of what outside of the beginning medium. If they started with movies like Star Wars, or if they started with television like Star Trek,
absolutely,
they should be highly selective. They shouldn't just say because it shares the name Star Trek or Star Wars, it's immediately part of the universe.
Okay, this is interesting. Comics Kid 2099, Vince.
What? Yes.
You know what? I'm sorry. That's his second part. His first part starts with me, and this is interesting because this is actually directly related to what we were just talking about. I can't believe these things lined up.
There's a stream.
My question is about canon. What? Cap, you've said before that you enjoy something Trek related, but it's not canon, that you're disappointed. I think you said this recently in a recommends video. Everybody's like, oh, that Federation book, Captain Logan, is confusing us. My question is, why can't it be canon for you? For you, if you prefer to view the eugenics wars as they were perceived by Greg Cox, then why not, even if not on screen? As long as you enjoy it, what's the harm? There is no harm. I completely agree with that. The problem is when you start getting with other fans, you know what I mean? The difficulty is you don't want to get into those fan arguments where it's like, where you go, well, I consider this canonical because this did it really well, so this... You can't start using things that are... You have to have common ground, I think, is the deal. So if there is, you know, a considered canon kind of across the board, and then you get into a conversation with somebody about why something, I'm being vague, but why something works in a particular episode of something or something, it gets really sticky when you start going, oh, well, that was explained in this book you never read, that nobody else considers canon except for me because I like it. You know what I mean? So I think that's where it becomes kind of problematic. What do you think?
I think part of the deal is that when you start trying to create more stuff, if there's not an agreed upon canon, then you will unfortunately make contradictions to stuff that is not necessarily canon, or that is canon, and then you've made an issue, you've made a continuity error. And also, I feel like, to give credence to what you're saying, there's a reason why there are industry terminology. Like, the word portrayal and representation largely mean the same thing, but, or to represent. But if you look into film terminology, they mean two different things. One is the representation of a particular group of people, and then portrayal is an actor's portrayal of a character. So if you say one to somebody who studies film, they'd say, you're using that wrong. So, I mean, even medical terminology, you get somewhere and you say this one word, and then suddenly they've chopped off the wrong leg. So,
that's right.
That's a little hyperbolic, but still.
No, but you're right. You're talking about speaking the same language.
Yes.
And yes, you're going to have contradictions within what's considered canon. Again, Star Trek has contradictions plenty, you know, within itself. But at least that's more manageable than if you start, because I mean the thing is there are like multiple book continuities with Trek. I mean there are things where, you know, these books will call back to these other books, but nothing else. They don't think about those. So you know those things are gonna contradict that sort of thing. So what I like to do is kind of the best of both worlds of what Comics Kid's talking about. I will sometimes, if I think something was done really well, say, that could back up something, say, all right, this doesn't really count, but I wish it did. You know what I mean? This is how it ought to have been done, and this would have completely explained away the problem that you have with this thing. And I know I go to this a lot. My case in point is the Countdown comic with Star Trek, which clears up a multitude of sins with that film. And if only some of this, and I don't like to say it should be considered canon. I just wish that stuff that was in it was put in the movie.
Indeed.
So there you go. If you haven't read that, you should read it. It's cool.
I'd like to.
Vince.
Yes!
You've said before that you feel like you have to watch a movie because it's part of film canon. Film canon, not the same kind of canon, he says.
Indeed.
But you almost sound as if you are not going to enjoy yourself. My question is, if you see a movie that looks horrible to you, Comics Kid's a thinker, man. I like him a lot.
I like Comics Kid.
My question is, if you see a movie that looks horrible to you, even if it's widely accepted as part of film canon, aka everyone thinks it's worthwhile, then why should you feel obligated to watch it? Since same with comics, books, or TV shows.
I feel like, I'll say this, that I don't feel obligated to like it just because everybody else does, even though sometimes I do feel bad, like, oh, I'm not as artsy as they are. But as long as I feel like I need to watch it, dissect it, and then broaden my understanding of this thing that we call art, of this thing that we call the film medium. So somebody says to me, oh, you have to see Ben-Hur. You just have to. It's one of the most amazing movies ever made. And which, incidentally, that's one of the movies of film canon that I've not seen is Ben-Hur.
I've never seen it and watched it all the way through either.
I hear it is amazing, and I would like to see it. I think it's more like when somebody says this movie's amazing, and then they explain it to me, and I say that sounds ridiculous, and then I sit down and watch it, and then I'm highly annoyed that anybody even likes it. And I'm like, why are we calling this a good movie? Well, part of the deal is that I get annoyed with things being with things being part of film canon. And only being part of film canon because they're significant historically. So just because The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is the first horror movie ever made, or considered the first horror movie ever made, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good movie. I mean, it's highly annoying. All of the characters are flat. People do things that are kind of silly. It's extremely standard in the way of like, you could make this a Saturday morning kids cartoon, but it's a little trippy. It's not particularly hard to follow, but if you're kind of hungover, you probably won't get it. But that's the thing, is that I get annoyed. I get a little leery of watching film canon because people treat it like it's gold. And also, I have this thing that's deep-rooted in me that if somebody treats it like it's the most amazing thing ever, I'm like...
You gotta immediately scrutinize it, yeah.
I'm like, we'll see. I got a tug on my shirt. I'm like, fine, I'll read this Frank Miller comic book. Pot shot. Obligatory. Frank Miller.
That took 25 minutes this time.
I'm getting better. The sickness is going away.
And the difficulty, of course, is that immediately takes your perspective of it. So even if it was amazing, you're already predisposed to not like it as well. When we talk about film canon, when we're talking about the definition of it, I feel like people have a couple different definitions of what that should mean, and I have what I feel. I have an idea, I think, of what it really is. And I think what film canon really is are the films that were the most influential. And I think that when you talk to film buffs that talk about film canon, they are, whether or not they love a film, they are talking about the films that were the most important historically. You were talking about historically. Here's the thing, though. I think that is... This is just my opinion. I think that is precisely what film canon should be judged on. I really do. I think that the list of whatever films we put for whatever genre of film canon, though, they should be the films that had the most impact on the rest of the industry that influenced it to become what it is today. Which means that it doesn't matter if the film is good or not, it is important historically. Mm-hmm. And then the question becomes, should we watch it so that we have a better understanding of history? Maybe so. I don't think that you should feel obligated to do that, but I feel like this is what's great about it, okay? What's great about considering film canon, the films that were most important, is that that's not as much of a matter of opinion, right? If we're trying to say these are the best movies ever made, well, that's always going to be up to people's opinions. But if you say... if you want a really great understanding of film, watch the most influential films, that's not so much open to interpretation. We can go back and figure out the films that were most influential.
Maybe, that's a terrific point. Maybe what I should say is that I get annoyed with people that
and people
say
need to just stop acting like that makes them good, that they were influential. That's my point. but if no, I'm sorry, let me just say this: if nobody ever acted that way, if no film buffs were ever like The Cabinet of Caligari is a great movie because it was influential, and then people said you should watch these because they're important and it will broaden your horizons and it will give you a better understanding of the history of film, you'd have no problem with the idea of film canon.
You know, exactly. I watched a movie the other day because it's part of film canon, and then I realized what was so significant about this movie. I've always heard people say, "Is it safe? Is it safe?" What are you talking about? And then I watched The Running Man, and I went, "Oh." Oh no, not Running Man. That's the Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah,
Running Man.
yeah.
Marathon Man.
Oh, okay. I've never seen
Dustin
Marathon
Hoffman movie.
I
Entirely solid.
love Running Man. It's hilarious.
Influential, historically important, and incidentally, very good.
Oh, okay.
So I enjoyed that movie quite a lot. Some of it may be kind of convenient, but it's an interesting movie. I mean, that's the thing, is that just because it's part of film canon does not, or just because it's historically significant doesn't necessarily mean it's not good, but just because it's historically significant doesn't necessarily mean that it's good.
I feel like it is very dangerous to put together a list of movies that are considered to be the greatest things ever made and then try to dupe people into thinking that they must have the same opinions as everybody else. That's dangerous. You shouldn't do that. That's not fair.
I mean, part of the deal is that you go into, like, American Film Institute, blah, blah, and a lot of their movies, like, the top 100 movies ever made. Well, what's that mean? Top, incidentally, or should mean best. Because you're talking about the things that, like, the cream that rises to the top.
Yeah, and I mean, they do have a board that votes, and so, I mean, it's fair. It's just that we need to not act like if you don't like it, there's something wrong with you, or you don't understand, or you just don't understand it, or that kind of thing. You know, I've talked about this with a number of films that are on that list, where I go, I get why this is important. I even get why it is technically a good film. I just don't personally like watching it. You know what I mean? Those are two very different things. And also, we've talked about this before, is it good or do you like it? Those are not the same thing.
Yeah. You know, I would say that one of the best horror movies ever made is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I don't like the movie.
I'm not sure I ever care to sit down and watch it again, but I'm glad I did the first time, yeah.
It's good. It's entirely worth watching once, but it's just difficult to watch. It's disgusting.
Silence of the Lambs is precisely the same way. I don't know that I ever...
Well, I'd probably give that one another shot.
Yeah.
Although it is pretty damaging.
It's more entertaining than
Henry, yeah.
Yeah, but you see where I'm going with this, though. I'm not sure that if I died tomorrow, I'd be upset if I never saw that film again. You know what I'm saying? But I'm glad I watched it. I just feel like, to answer Comics Kid's question, at least for me, and I know it was addressed to you, but I find it a very interesting question. I feel like for my money, I don't want to only watch things that I like, because I feel like I have a better understanding of things, and I just think it's important when you have an opinion to have a considered opinion, and that means that you have to broaden your palette out and look at things that aren't necessarily immediately to your liking.
I would agree with that. I would also say that something that is historically significant will inevitably, at least one of those things, will have bearing on something that you like right now. So, yeah. At some point, like, even if you like Clerks, it's like, wow, I really like the Clerks cartoon show. Well, there's a huge part where they keep saying, is it safe? Maybe you should watch Marathon Man. Maybe it's something that'd be in your palate. Apparently Kevin Smith likes it. So, it's worth looking into that older stuff, but sorry, Comics Kid, you do have a point. I do sometimes not look excited to watch some of these things.
I felt much more comfortable living in present-day America after I finally sat down and watched Fight Club. It just made my life so much easier.
You know, that's another one of those movies.
That thing was quoted so freaking much, and then I finally sat down and watched it and was like, okay, now I feel better. I know what they're talking about.
Now, Fight Club is a good movie. It's well written, it's well acted, it's well thought out. It's just not something that has that amazing effect on me because I saw it after everybody told me it's amazing.
Yeah.
I saw American Psycho independently of that. And you know what? I'm one of those people that are like, oh, the movie's amazing. But Fight Club, it's a good movie. Entirely worth watching. If you haven't seen it, see it. But I'm not going to jump up and down on you if you haven't seen it. Incidentally, I'm not going to jump up and down on you if you haven't seen American Psycho, because that just ruins a movie.
Everybody, thanks as always for watching Geeks Not Nerds, and this is the first part of our third round. Yeah, I got it. Yes, of the multi-topic extravaganza. We'll be doing part 2 for you next week. We didn't get to very many questions because they were very interesting and insightful, and we had things to say. So, if you have anything you'd like us to try to tackle in the multi-topic extravaganza, feel free to leave that in the comments. And if we don't get to it this round, we'll either make a video about it or we'll do it in the next round. Thanks as always for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince, reminding you to support your local comic book store.
And we'll see you next time.